Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating, of course, percentage of survival.
Well, that's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right. How is everything going this Sunday with you?
It's Sunday. Monster Truck Rally.
I have never gone to see a Monster Truck Rally, but I've seen car destruction derbies. Those are fun.
Yeah, you used to go with a friend of the show, Matt, right?
No, the first time I seen a destruction derby was recently.
Oh, I didn't know if that was something you used to do with good old Matt Matthew, Shiny Time Station.
No, I did it recently with my wife.
That's fun.
And
what are you doing over there? Are you going to talk into the microphone, or are you just going to look off to the side?
No. Why are you giving me Why are you giving I don't need your I need you to pay attention, and you'll get no second chance.
So you like demolition derbies?
Oh, I like when things break. I don't like it when car accidents happen, but I do like it when people
You like
crash
it when
cars.
people intentionally do a car accident, but not for bad reasons.
Yeah, not for fraudulent reasons.
What kind of on theme for this episode? Because we're going to be talking about people doing jerks, being jerks or doing jokes.
Jerks or jokes. Probably the best named episode this year is going to be this episode, Jerks or Jokes. And the people are listening and are just wondering if we're just talking about ourselves this entire time.
Yeah, are we a joke or are we jerks?
Sometimes we're a little bit of both.
Sometimes one is one, the other's the other.
Yeah, you're usually a joke.
Yeah, I was going to actually say that.
Yeah, well, that's true. You are you are a joke.
It's because I'm funny.
Funny looking.
Well, getting into what we've recently been playing in a perfect segue.
This is probably our weakest opening.
Yeah, this is bad. But we've probably have had worse. I mean, we've done 340 plus episodes.
That's the thing about people say you can only improve. That's not true. You can in fact always get worse. There's not really a bottom in a lot of things. Even if money and business, there's no bottom. You could continue to go deeper into the hole.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't rise to the top. This episode, not doing that. Beyond the name of the episode, Jerk or Joke.
You're going to say that. This episode's going to max out. We're going to get 80 billion downloads in one.
This one episode, and then people are going to immediately say, do not listen to this podcast. It's crap.
Yeah.
Anyway, first of all, I'd like to make an announcement that I beat a game.
Oh, man. Cue the Seth Beats a Game music that I have to go hunt down every time it happens, because it happens so infrequently.
Yeah, well, I never said that I never said that I was good at playing video games. But I did beat a game. It was Incident at the Galley House. It actually came out recently. I talked about it in my recently played only a few episodes ago. I had a Sunday where I had all the time to myself, and I played through it and beat it in the Sunday. It's definitely one of those games, if you have a significant amount of time, not necessarily a moderate amount of time dedicated that you can dedicate to a game, it is a game that you can play over a weekend or two and completely see it through. Right as I was getting the hang of things, it completely 180'd and had another onion layer get pulled back, which was really cool. But to talk a little bit about that game before I go into my recently played Incident at the Galley House is a timeline death detective game. So you are observing the past and people are randomly dying, and you have to kind of determine where people are in the house and who they are based on context cues of listening to the stories. So you have to get people's last name, like full names, and figure out where they are in the home and like who's in the right room and stuff. Really cool concept of a game. The game that I was recently playing for this segment, though, was the demo of Dim Haven, The Lost Source. The game has been released in June of 2026. I got the demo back in Next Fest, and the demo is still available to be played. It's by the same folks behind Quern, which is a puzzle first-person adventure game. So Quern is, if I recall from playing it, I've played it a while ago, is kind of more like Myst in regards to the graphics and like interactions, or maybe like more like Riven, where it's like, you know, like you're interacting with this world that's kind of photorealistic. Dim Haven of the Lost Source, you're in the game, and it's a first-person game, but instead of interacting with like vignettes, you're interacting with the environment for the puzzles, but all the puzzles have like a blocky appearance. Like their art aesthetic is like from a distance, like all the text looks like far away, like video game text, like very much like very blocky type of stuff. And then like when you pull it up, it becomes realistic. It's a very interesting perspective, and it's a very interesting graphics. And I played a little bit of it. I played it on my Steam Deck, and it's not a game that I necessarily recommend to play with a controller. It's doable, but it's definitely more for me a mouse and keyboard type of an event, because you have to kind of like reference different things and be able to click, and some of the puzzles require a lot of mouse movement, which is faster with a mouse. But you play as a girl by the name of Emily, and she's looking for her uncle in a location that is consistent of puzzles. It is a game that is set up in a way where, and people may or may not like this, but it's a kind of a one puzzle at a time type of game, where like you have a point that you need to get past, and you need to get the clues to get past that puzzle, and you cannot like solve an adjacent puzzle because you think you can solve it. You have to solve all the puzzles kind of in order. You may like that, or you may want to be able to free roam. So if you want to be able to free roam, you may find Dim Haven a little linear, but I liked what I played. I may actually end up picking it up. I'm in that state where I either pick another game that I can play quickly, or I go back to like Rogue Trader and sink another 10-15 hours just in that. So yeah, so that's what I've been recently playing, the demo of Dim Haven, The Lost Source. Zach, what about you? What have you recently been playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing Complex the Expedition, developed by PG Wave, released in 2025. Complex the Expedition is a horror exploration game based on the lore and the aesthetic of the Backrooms. I've already talked about a Backrooms game before, so I'm not going to go into the whole spiel what the Backrooms is. Long story short, it's a thing that came from 4chan that became a big old meme, and it's kind of not like a funny meme, like a horror meme. But Complex the Expedition is a first-person game where you play as a researcher, part of a team, doing an expedition of the Backrooms. It's not really explained why this team is doing an expedition, that they have a portal that they can enter the Backrooms with. They have like lab equipment set up inside of the Backrooms, and you take control of a drone at one point, and then the drone breaks, and your guy's like, I can go find the drone. I know where it went. And then bad things happen to you. It's pretty interesting. The game is played from the perspective of you holding a camcorder as you walk around. So occasionally you get like artifacts on the screen, and there's like the tracking stuff shows up sometimes. And this also adds kind of an aesthetic to it in terms of the sound and the lighting. The sound is constantly a little bit muffled because it's being recorded on tape, and tape kind of has that quality to it, especially if you had it on the lowest settings. And the lighting is also slightly softer, a little muted because of the age of the tape. It's supposed to be, there's a date at some point that appears that shows it's supposed to be like late 80s when this is taking place. So, it is an aging tape. Likely the color has faded a bit. But I think one of the things that I really liked about the game and what made it feel particularly frightening for me is that so far, and I played a good kind of chunk of the opening, but there has been 0 jump scares, which I like. I don't mind a jump scare, especially if it's a well done jump scare.
Didn't you have a jump scare when you saw that statue?
That wasn't a jump scare. It just frightened me. A jump
I
scare,
see.
like something that like yells at you at a loud volume and like
Oh.
pops out of nowhere.
Mike Juggernaut. So the only jump scare was me.
Oh yes, because Seth played an audio cue on our soundboard while I was playing, and that was a jump scare. But there are no like so far nothing's like popped out at me. There's been eerie things such as Seth was asking about. There was a statue that I turned a corner and there was a statue just kind of standing there staring at me. That was a little freaky and made me feel unnerved, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a jump scare as it didn't like pop out at me or like do the Five Nights at Freddy's thing where it made a loud screech. However, you also get this vibe of just being watched the entire time you're playing. Occasionally you might see things at the corner of your eye, just things in the periphery there for a second, and then when you get closer they're gone, or were they even there? Was it just a glitch on the camera? I like that kind of aesthetic. I like that type of horror. So that is Complex the Expedition. Again, it came out in 2025 and I like it so far. There's another game that also came out from them. I think it came out earlier, just called Complex Found Footage, which I also played a little bit of. I believe that's more of like a proof of concept demo type of thing, and this is their like main game, as that was given away for free for a long time, and now I think it's like $5.99, and this is like $15. So that is Complex the Expedition from PG Wave. Well, getting into today's episode, we're going to be talking about, as we alluded to before, kind of this concept of jerk or joke. So we're going to be giving you some stories, some well-known stories from MMO history of people just doing things that are a little jerky, and kind of trying to decide whether or not these individuals were in fact jerks or jokes. And yeah, these are just well-known famous events that have occurred in MMO history. This was Seth's idea, so I don't know if he wants to give a little background on what gave him this idea.
Yeah, sure. And I actually think one of the moments in MMO history that happened when I was like playing it happened when I was playing the MMO during the time that like it occurred, so it was relevant to me. But there was two moments that we're not going to talk about in this episode. So these are all unique jerks and jokes, but I guess one of the jerks and jokes moment was the attack of Serenity Now on a funeral in WoW.
Oh yes.
That where there was for anyone who's unfamiliar, there is a YouTube video that was released. I think it was originally released on Newgrounds or something like that, and then would eventually go onto YouTube, and essentially someone passed away in real life, and her guild wanted to honor her by having a funeral with her. She played on a PvP zone, so they had it on a PvP zone, and during the funeral, a raid from a competitive guild came in and killed every single person at the funeral.
That's like some like Godfather, like Goodfellas type thing. Like, yeah.
And one of the things that the guild said, that was the attacking guild, said, listen, she also liked PvP. So like, at the end of the day, she probably would have thought that it was funny. I didn't know the person who passed. I didn't know the people who did it. So I don't necessarily want to put words in either of their mouths in regards to why and what they thought about it. But that's kind of like a moment where that's like a jerk and joke type of situation, depending on how you view it. I always grew up thinking it was hilarious, but sometimes when I think about it, it also is like, that was kind of a jerk move. Some of my other favorite jerk and joke moments will be in this episode. So Zach, and part of the reason I thought about this episode was because of I recently learned about one of the jokes moments that occurred in this episode, and we'll talk about that one as we get along. Zach, do you have any favorite joke moments that we're not going to talk about?
That we're not going to talk about. Most of the ones that we're going to talk about have been my favorite moments in gaming history. One of our listeners, actually Sean, I mentioned to him that we're doing this episode. I mentioned to him that we're doing this episode, and he asked about Leroy Jenkins, and part of me was thinking about Leroy Jenkins and including that, but as a sad fact, Leroy Jenkins was in fact staged, so it is not a jerk or joke moment.
But the Serenity Now funeral bomb was not staged.
No, that was not staged. I think MMOs have a long history of these kind of things that happen where just like ridiculous things will happen on a large scale. And yeah, and they go back to the beginning, right?
I think before we get into it, but related to the game that we're going to first talk about, I had a friend who played Ultima Online, and he apparently was able to steal or pickpocket like boats from people like off them, and then like we would like run around after stealing their boats. But yeah, so the first game and to kind of go through is going to be Ultima Online, and we have a fun story about that. That is not my friend stealing boats, but I just wanted to mention that that's kind of a jerky joke moment.
Right, and this story is actually a story we told before. We told it back in episode 125 when we covered Ultima and Ultima Online. We talked about this famous incident, which was the assassination of Lord British. To remind everyone who haven't listened to episode 125 or don't want to go back and listen 200 plus episodes ago, Ultima Online was an early MMORPG developed in the 1990s by Richard Garriott and Origin Systems. Online games have existed long before Ultima Online, of course, some of the earliest being multi-user dungeons and some early graphical games like Habitat and Neverwinter Nights. Ultima Online actually came out at kind of the best time, as Neverwinter Nights' servers were shutting down in around 1997 when Ultima Online was launching, so it was a good segue for people leaving Neverwinter Nights to go into a new game that arguably was very similar but a little better, because Ultima Online I think is a bit more complex than Neverwinter Nights ever was. Development began on Ultima Online in 1995 and was presented to the public as Ultima Online Shattered Legacy. Origin claimed that more than 3,000 participants were in the alpha testing stages. The game would also feature things like persistent player housing, skill-based character progression, crafting, player economy, and PvP. There were plans to implement an artificial life engine, but it was scrapped in the game's beta. Richard Garriott was quoted as saying, "We thought it was fantastic. We'd spent an enormous amount of time and effort on it, but what happened was all the players went in and just killed everything. So fast that the game couldn't spawn them fast enough to make the simulation even begin." So they had this cool idea, but players like to do what players do, which is be jerks and murder innocent things. And speaking of murder, Ultima Online would enter its beta in 1997. During a stress test, tragedy struck. You see, Richard Garriott would often log into the game during the beta in order to communicate with the other players. In the game, he would appear as his alter ego, Lord British. Lord British was invulnerable, as Richard had access to the admin controls, so he could just set himself as invulnerable. During the stress test, there was a crash, and after rebooting the server, Richard forgot to enable his invulnerability. Before he could give himself God mode, a player named Rains cast a fire field spell, which set everything on fire and killed Lord British. Thus, Lord British was assassinated.
Yeah, and part of it was because he couldn't move.
Oh no, he could move. So according to an interview he did, he not only could move, but he intentionally walked back into the fire because he thought he wouldn't die. He said that when the fire occurred from the fire field spell, his immediate reaction was, of course, to step backwards and avoid the fire. But he realized, oh, I don't need to step out of this fire. I'm Lord British. I'm immortal, and it makes no difference. So he stepped back into the fire, assuming it would be harmless, and then died. And he just kind of was like, uh-oh. And apparently, the fun fact about him forgetting to put on his invulnerability flag, he forgot to do that 6 months ago, prior to the murder. It wasn't like...
Oh, nice. He was lulled into a false sense of security.
Yes, it wasn't like the reboot happened, and then the guy immediately killed him. He had been not immortal for 6 months.
That's pretty funny.
Now, the player, Rains, would be banned from Ultima Online, but according to Origin, it was not for the assassination. Origin stated Rains had prior complaints against his account, and the assassination just kind of highlighted all these complaints, as they were like, who's this guy that killed Lord British?
He's a troublemaker.
Players would actually end up protesting the Rains band, and also the treatment of players who witnessed the assassination, as players who witnessed the assassination had their characters killed by the game producer Star Long, because apparently Origin's thought was, if you see our master killed, you have to die too. The beta ultimately ended in September of 1997 with an end-of-the-world scenario where multitudes of monsters would just spawn in and kill every character on the screen. And apparently, according to the same interview I was reading with Richard Garriott, one of the reasons they killed a bunch of people who witnessed the assassination was because they didn't immediately know it was Rains. So they were like, well, we don't know who killed Lord British, so let's just kill everyone that was there because one of them did it. So that was part of the reason why they retaliated as they did. It sounds kind of like when you're telling the story, I was telling the story earlier to Suzanne, and they were like, that sounds very petty. And I was like, yeah, but I think they were all just nerds and being goofy. Like, they were probably all laughing about this. I don't think Richard Garriott has that big of an ego that he would wipe out a server just because someone killed him. It sounds like he was having fun with the moment.
I think there was a time that Richard Garriott took it pretty seriously.
Probably,
and then evolved to find it more funny over time. And then I like how later iterations, you could actually, like Ultima 9, I believe, you can make essentially use getting a bread maker, making some bread and putting rat poison and swapping out the meal that he's going to eat will kill Lord British.
That's funny.
So like there is like incorporated ways to kill him. So I think that now, I think like Richard Garriott thinks it's hilarious.
And this would really be the question though, is what Rains did a joke or was it a jerk move? In my opinion, I think it was a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I think from what I've read from Rains themselves is that they did it because they did not expect it to happen. According to Rains, when Lord British was there, they're just like, I'm just going to cast fire spell and see what happens. They were like, I don't think it's going to actually kill him, and then did.
Right.
And Rains was like, yeah, that's hilarious, but I don't think it was an intentional murdering of Lord British. There wasn't some grand plot to assassinate Lord British. I think it was an in-the-moment decision to just do something silly, and that's what happened.
I mean, you have to be somewhat of a troublemaker to decide.
Yes,
that
and apparently Rains was, right?
Like he wanted to be a troublemaker. So there's probably, to your point, there's probably a little bit of a jerk moment there, but I think ultimately lighting fire on a admin character is just kind of funny.
I think so too.
The next kind of jerk and joke moment that we're going to talk about is in EverQuest, which EverQuest is a game that we've talked in the past about, but haven't really focused an episode on. I thought we did an episode on EverQuest, but it's probably one that is due for its own dedicated episode if we can't find one. So we won't necessarily go into the whole depth and history of EverQuest, but the original EverQuest was created as a concept by John Smedley in 1996 and designed by Brad McQuaid, Steve Clover, and Bill Troist. The game would be developed by 989 Studios and published by Sony in 1999. The game was incredibly popular and became a major stepping stone in the history of MMOs. Upon 24 hours after its launch, there were more than 10,000 active players, 60,000 subscribers existed by April 1999, and around 225,000 copies were sold within the year. By September 2000, there were 259,000 subscribers, and the game is still popular with about 82,000 monthly active players. The only thing that really took EverQuest out was the release of World of Warcraft. A lot of the folks that played EverQuest just migrated over to World of Warcraft, and as much as time that you can dedicate to a game, and as much free time as some folks have, you really generally time sync one MMO at a time. It's very difficult to time sync multiple MMOs, and so they just took all their EverQuest time and they put it into WoW. There was a particular user that inspired me entirely to do this episode, and that user was Fanzy. Fanzy was a bard who played on Solon Zek, which is a no-rules penal colony server. Fanzy, according to MassivelyOP.com, learned about a protection or exploit that was in place where a character under level 6 would not get attacked by an enemy player. So you could get up to level 5 and you won't get attacked by these enemy players. And being a no-rules penal colony server, there was a tendency for people to team up on newbies and kill them and spawn camp them and just find them wherever they are. And in EverQuest, when you died, it was bad.
You could use like months and months of progress.
Right. One of the things about EverQuest is that you lost all of your equipment. It stayed where you died, and you had to walk back to it naked.
Yes.
Unlike WoW, where you walk back as a ghost and you have durability destruction on your equipment, EverQuest you had to go back and get your equipment, and the people who killed you knew that that's what would happen, so they would just wait until you came back and then killed you again.
Yes.
And they would spawn camp, and it was it was a no rules server, and what ends up happening is the jerks at the top kept in rules. But Fancy was thinking, hey, if I don't get to level 6, they can't hurt me. And if I play a bard, I can give myself a little speed boost. And if I have a little speed boost, I can essentially train enemies to follow me. And there is an enemy that is very slow that I can outrun with my little speed boost, and that is the sand giant. And what he would do is he would essentially wander where sand giants lived, and then once they started to attack him, he would take them away somewhere. And now here's the thing with EverQuest. If you are attracted by a monster, so like if you're walking through an area and a monster decides to attack you, in like World of Warcraft, if you just ran far enough away, they'll go back to their range because they had a range. EverQuest, they didn't have a range. They would just follow you until you left the zone. And there was actually folks, like it was a thing in EverQuest where you would have to shout out like, hey, a train's coming to town. And that means that like you essentially like, hey, there's a train of skeletons following me because I was fighting them and I ran away, and now they come to town. There's a train coming, like watch out, because there's going to be a bunch of monsters that are just going to all of a sudden show up and start fighting. So Fancy used the ability not to be killed by the other players and the ability to outrun sand giants to get a giant train of sand giants and then run them into camps of people. So then you'd be sitting around with your group of evildoers ready to beat up on some newbie, and all of a sudden Fancy would just come running through your village, and then here comes the sand giants and they would just destroy you. Fancy roleplayed that he was a kind of like a Robin Hood, and that he wasn't a ruthless killer. He would always shout out, go, good team, and that he only wanted to destroy the quote-unquote bad guys, who were the guys that were causing issues with the server.
And in his way.
And in his way. And he would warn players when he arrived, and as long as he stayed under 6th level, he wouldn't be able to get attacked by any of the players. He could still get attacked by mobs, but he just outran them. The devs at Sony Online Entertainment would keep an eye on the events that were going on. They would get complaints about Fancy. A GM at one point spoke to him and told Fancy that he was allowed to... Essentially, the GMs were on Fancy's side. They were like, he's not breaking the rules. Like, he's just doing this. But it got to a point where Fancy reportedly killed around 400 characters that were other players in the game, and the enough complaints had Fancy asked to not come back, or to not at least be under the level 5. And so they had to close that loophole of the under level 5 immunity, and Fancy was defeated for a moment because they changed the rule, right? So then his immunity would, because he's under 5 level immunity, give or take, so he could keep, specifically was casting Spirit of the Wolf, which made them run very fast. Because they took that away from him, he figured out a different way to get people. And what he would do is he would go and leveled his character up, and got to his character to be a higher level, and got the ability to charm NPCs. And so what he would then go do is find locations where players were being toxic to him, and he would find the Priest of Discord. The Priest of Discords were NPCs that were in all the cities of Norath, and they were like level 50. And the Priest of Norath was like an admin character NPC that could flag you for PvP if you asked him to flag you. He would also be able to he was able to do some various different things with tomes and stuff like that. But he was level 50 and was very powerful, had a lot of hit points. So what Fancy would do was he would charm NPCs that were near the Priest of Discord and provoked the Priest of Discord to attack. And when the Priest of Discord attacked, he killed everything. He would just wipe out the entire town. And anyone who was near the bank or like a soulbinder in the center of town would just be killed by the Priest of Discord, who's now rampaging through it. Eventually, Fancy was engaged a DM versus player duel and was killed. And so he was defeated twice. Fancy was defeated twice by administration to stop his antics. And Fancy's his argument was, "Hey, this is a no rule server. Why are you stopping my loopholes?" And they did. And it just goes to show you, It's always no rules for the people who are the bullies. Once it becomes turned against the bullies, all of a sudden the rules come on. So, Zach, what do you think? Fancy, jerk, or joke?
Man, what a question. I think Fancy is I think he's a vigilante. A troll, for sure. Undeniably, what he was doing was trolly. But, I mean, his goal was to bring order to this no-rules chaos server. And he did bring some order for quite some time.
He was essentially trolling the trolls.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think it's perfectly acceptable to troll trolls. I think it is fine to troll trolls. It's not so fine to troll people who don't want to be trolled. But, I mean, it can be funny. But it can be mean, too, because it could be bullying. If people are being jerks right back at them, so they get a little taste of their own medicine is never a bad thing, at least in video games, in my opinion.
It's true. Sometimes you spawn in with they don't have triples in Player Unknown Battlegrounds. They don't have triples yet into the game, so you have to spawn in with a random and your 3 friends. And sometimes you have a bike with 3 seats, and sometimes you kill the random person so that the entire party could get on the bike.
Getting into actually the competitor to EverQuest. Wow.
The killer of EverQuest.
The killer of EverQuest. Our next story is a bit more complicated. It's a story I wanted to include because I think it's a very cool story in this type of line, but there really isn't a single person who can be blamed for this. But before we get into this story, let's just go quickly over World of Warcraft. Released in 2004, World of Warcraft became one of the biggest MMORPGs to hit the market. It was incredibly popular, being one of the best-selling computer games of the early 2000s, with over 1.4 million copies sold by August of 2006. The game redefined the genre of MMOs in many ways, and it also turned Warcraft from this kind of niche series to a household name. I think everyone knew what Warcraft was after World of Warcraft came out. Warcraft, before World of Warcraft came out, was solely people who like to play DOS games like Seth and myself. But once it was a big smash hit in the MMO scene, it became a much more well-regarded franchise. With the game being as big as it was, it's not a surprise that there were some glitches. But one of these glitches became incredibly infamous in both gaming history and even in the scientific community. This, of course, is the corrupted blood plague incident. So World of Warcraft used a system where players could go to different dungeons or fortresses or cities and participate in raids. During the raids, the players often tried to defeat an enemy or complete a task. One of these raids was Zul'Gurub, a temple city located in Stranglethorn and inhabited by jungle trolls. The boss you would encounter was Hakkar the Soulflayer, who would debuff players with a spell called Corrupted Blood. The way Corrupted Blood worked was that it would transmit between the players in the same area and would last for around 10 seconds or until Hakkar was defeated. The developers had intended that the effects of the debuff would only ever occur within the Zul'Gurub region, as you really can't get far away from the region with the effects still in place. Due to this, they intentionally didn't plan for what would happen if you encountered the Corrupted Blood plague outside of Zul'Gurub, as it hypothetically could never be encountered outside of Zul'Gurub. But the thing with the hypothesis is that it can be disproven. You see, players in World of Warcraft can have an animal companion with them, and you can bring that animal companion into fights, such as the fight with Hakkar. And during the fight with Hakkar, animal companions could experience the effects of corrupted blood. Now, corrupted blood would cause some damage to the player and to their companion. So something players would often do is put their companion into a suspended animation of sorts by essentially pocketing the companion by deactivating it so it would go back into their inventory, and then the companion wouldn't be injured. The idea being is that when the player was done with the battle, they would respawn the companion and the companion would be healed because Hakkar was defeated. Developers, however, forgot to create a rule that removed the debuff when the companion reactivated, and it would negate the rule that the battle had won. So, here's what happened. Players would defeat Hakkar, fast travel back to the main city to do what most players do, like fix their items, and upon arriving at the main city, a player who deactivated their companion that had corrupted blood would be reactivated, and suddenly that animal companion became a disease vector because the animal companions could spread to other player characters. Thus, corrupted blood would spread to anyone in the area, including NPCs who could not die. So corrupted blood was designed to kill you, essentially, or eventually wear off. But when the NPCs got infected, they couldn't die, and it would spread back and forth between NPCs in close range of each other because they would just not die. So they became carriers of corrupted blood. Suddenly, corrupted blood was spreading through the world of Azeroth, with major cities being infected. And the infection, by the way, did between 263 to 337 hit points every 2 seconds, meaning the highest level players at the time would die in 30 seconds of being infected. And protective armor would take damage upon each death. So eventually, your armor would reach 0 and you would have no armor anymore, and you would just die instantly upon being infected.
Panic spread. Forums exploded with warnings about where to travel and how to avoid the disease. Players described the cities as being filled with corpses of other player characters. Some even theorized that Blizzard planned this as a major event, but no, it was just a pandemic within a virtual world. Healer classes took on the role of first responders, aiding where they could. Paladins attempted to remove debuffs, though reinfection could occur immediately after healing. Some players took to becoming town criers to mark areas as infected so that travelers wouldn't risk entering a village that had fallen to the plague. While all this was happening, Blizzard worked to fix the game. They made a statement on September 16th stating that they were aware of the issue and attempted to restart servers to provide quick patches to elevate the issue, and nothing helped until Blizzard performed a hard reset on the server and patched the game on October 8th to make pets immune to the corrupted blood. So for pretty much half of a month, they were it was just running amok. The event was weirdly popular. Blizzard would actually bring about an intentional plague in 2008, and other MMOs would have their own intentional plagues, and then the world would have its own unintentional plague. Outside the game, though, the event became a major research point for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, who attempted to reach out to Blizzard to obtain data about the disease, but because it was truly random, Blizzard couldn't provide it. Articles from different universities has compared the event to a real-world pandemic, such as avian flu, 2002 SARS outbreak, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So joke or jerk? Not really either. Maybe the people who didn't think that pets, like the double click of the quality analyst, that didn't think pets could actually get this. And perhaps the jerk move that some players did intentionally spread the disease. The acts of griefing were studied by the Center of Terrorism Intelligence Studies as a model of bioterrorism. So if you sped corrupted blood on purpose, you may have been included in a bioterrorism study to determine why and how do we stop you.
It is fascinating. Like, World of Warcraft acts as this really weird microcosm of people. I mean, it is a large amount of people. I mean, it's more of a macrocosm. When this event occurred, it really, like, no one told players to act as first responders. Healers just did that because that's what they do. Paladins weren't told, oh, you got to remove the debuff. They just did that. The town criers just chose to do that because they were lower level. They knew they'd be infected first and that they would die quickest. So they just did what they could. And I think it's really fascinating to have this effectively virtual study done on the effects of a massive pandemic in a environment like a video game, and it being so well regarded in the scientific community as being this important, like, research point in epidemiology. It really is interesting what happened, and the people who spread it intentionally were jerks and arguably bioterrorists. But yeah, that's the corrupted blood incident in World of Warcraft. And now, to get into our final game, we're actually going to bring 2 stories from this final game. I'll take the first and Seth will take the next. So we've talked about assassination, we've talked about trolling, we've talked about bioterrorism. How about financial fraud? EVE Online is the rather infamous MMORPG in the sense that it is this massive sandbox experience where you can take on various spacely professions. You could take on a commerce job, a banking job, manufacturing, exploration, combat, piracy, and so on and so on and so on. I like to call EVE Online the libertarian dream because you could truly do anything you want in this game. Really, the world is your oyster in terms of what you want to do in your experience of EVE Online. Originally released in 2003, developed by CCP Games, EVE Online was designed to be big. It features over 7,800 different star systems and had, at one point, up to 500,000 subscribers in its peak. The game has been known for some very interesting events, such as one of the largest online battles called the Bloodbath of BR5RB, which has its own Wikipedia page, which had over 7,000 participants and the real-world cost of over $300,000, because EVE Online, you see, uses a currency called Interstellar Credit, or ISK. ISK can be obtained by purchasing an item called Plex with real-world money, and when you purchase Plex with real-world money, you can trade the Plex for either in-game currency or for subscription. Now, trading it for in-game currency means Plex has a value, thus ISK has a value and has a market value. And because of this, well, financial shenanigans have, of course, ensued. One of these events, it's pretty well known. It involved deception and trickery from a group that was just truly trying to claim a bounty. You see, one of the larger corporations run on EVE Online was the Ubiqua-Seraph, which was a corporation that had a CEO known as Muriel. According to a story from PC Gamer, Muriel was flying her ship alongside her lieutenant one night, her lieutenant being Aranis Zemdal, who was flying an Imperial Apocalypse starcraft. In fact, Aranis Zemdal's Apocalypse starcraft was one of 2 that existed in the entire game. It was an incredibly rare item, very expensive. While they're flying around in their territory, a message ran out across the server. That message just said, Nicole. Once that message was sent, Ubiqua-Seraph's offices were raided. Every hangar was emptied. Muriel's ship was destroyed in an ambush, and her escape pod was destroyed while she tried to escape. In fact, it was nuked. Her corpse, floating in space, lifeless, was captured by the Guiding Hand Social Club, who had perpetrated this entire ordeal. The GHSC was a mercenary group who had been infiltrating Ubiqua-Seraph for 10 months. They worked their way into every inch of the company, establishing themselves among the other staff and earning everyone's trust. And when the message Nicole came through the servers, their months of planning paid off, and the theft took over 30 billion ISK, equivalent to $16,500 at the time, in real-world money. GHC did this for one reason. They were paid by an anonymous client who contracted them to do this job. Now, the client didn't want the ships. The ships were just part of the score. GHC was allowed to do what they wanted. They took the ships. The client didn't want the money either. He didn't want the 30 billion worth of ISK. They didn't want the notoriety. They were anonymous. They never asked for their name to be given. They wanted one thing. They wanted the lifeless corpse of the CEO of Ubiqua-Seraph, Muriel, and that's all they wanted. So, was GHC jerks or a joke? I say jerks, but they were advantageous jerks.
What GHSC did was very allowable by the game. And the thing that I'm going to talk about was also kind of allowed by the game. EVE has a very open mindset, as Zach was mentioned. You can really do what you want. You can write contracts. You can form companies. You can transact businesses. It's the spreadsheet game for a reason, because it mimics life in a lot of ways, including all the boring aspects. Though they do frown upon fraud, but it's still kind of okay by the way that you won't necessarily get punished. But in the game, there was a couple players that did manage to commit some pretty big fraud. One of the bigger ones, which actually has a Guinness World Record for the largest virtual theft in MMORPG history, was done by a player named Callie in 2006, where they established a bank. They had a board, and Callie was created as was made the CEO, and it was the EVE Intergalactic Bank, EIB, and it operated on a system where an index was stored on an external server, allowing for the bank pool currency. And from here, the bank was able to offer loans, charge interest, and do what banks do. After Callie was made the CEO, he would go on to steal 790 billion ISK from the bank, and he would go and take that money. And from my understanding at the time when I was around in 2006, Callie would go on to spend that money on giant warships and going around and blasting people and essentially just saying, like, bring it on. From what I remember, he got the biggest, like, the capital size cruiser ship and just, like, opened it up and was like, bring it. And there was a video that would come out about a little after that, where Callie would go on to confess the crimes, and though admit that he did serve some jail time for it, and not for stealing all the ISK, which CCP said no, it's completely legitimate because he did it within the game and he did not transfer the money out, and thus would not get banned because he did not violate the game's game's end-user license agreement. It was entirely an in-game scam. But he also put a bounty on his own head and published a braggadocious video confession mocking his victims.
In a similar case, a different CEO in EVE Online, known as Rick
Yes.
Dick, embezzled funds, but then converted those funds into real-world money using illegal methods, and that got them to be banned.
Yes, they were banned from that. Callie was not banned.
Yeah, Rick Dick. So I'm reading a CBC news article about Rick Dick, and it is sad, actually. Rick Dick did this, according to them, because they needed medical funds for their son's hospital expenses. And that is a sad reality of crime, as sometimes people do illegal things because they truly need the money. And this was something that they felt that they could do that did get them in trouble and did get them banned from EVE Online. They stole about 200 billion interstellar credits, equivalent to it was a little over 6,000 real-world Australian dollars at the time.
Right, which is less than what Callie stole, which would still allow Callie to be the world record holder.
Right, yes. Yes.
Of close to 800 billion is.
Kylie's method, perfectly allowed, but once real world money got involved, that is a no.
That's a bannable offense. The only people that are making profit off this game are CCP.
That's right. So do you think Kylie's a jerk or a joke?
I think it's funny in hindsight, but I think for not being a participant. But if I was using EIB as my bank and then the CEO decided to go on a bank run, I would not be happy, and I would have wanted to hunt down that CEO in the game and try and get my money back. So I think definitely more on the jerk versus our hero fancy.
I think so too. But I'm going to be real with you. I would be a little nervous investing in an online game run by people that I don't know.
Yeah, but that's what the contract's for. There was contracts you signed.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
I made a character at EVE Online, and that's all my skills were contracts.
That sounds like something you would do.
The game is boring. I had a friend who really was into EVE Online, and he ran 2 computers, one for 2 different accounts. One of his account was just the mining ship, and because it would go fly out to mine, and it would take so long to fly out where the mines were, that he would just run it on a separate computer, and he had his other ship that would go to war and have fun, and then he had this other ship that was just going off to do some mines and coming back. That's gonna be it for our jerk and jokes.
Well, yeah, that will do it for our jerks or jokes episode. If you can think of anything fun from an MMO that you played in your time playing MMOs, let us know. We'll tell you how to do that at the end of this episode. But before that, we're going to get into our retro rewinds. Seth had me play Search for the Titanic for MS-DOS, developed by Codesmiths, and the Search for the Titanic for MS-DOS was developed by Codesmiths and Intracorp in 1989, largely based on Robert Ballard's expedition to find the Titanic. In fact, Robert Ballard apparently assisted with the production of the game. You have to plan your trip by recruiting personnel, lobbying for grants, finding a suitable boat, purchasing the appropriate equipment, and exploring one of the 75 different shipwrecks that are available to be explored. If you don't find the Titanic, you might find another shipwreck, including Noah's Ark. I didn't get as far as that, as everyone was rejecting me for my grant proposals. The way the grant proposals work is you approach an agency such as the Navy or the Oceanic Research Institute, and you choose how you're going to ask for this grant money by either suggesting that it's good publicity, or that you're just doing it for oceanic research, or that you're looking for treasure, or that it'd be a great opportunity, or they should just be charitable. And then from my experience, after trying to lobby everyone using all the methods, they say no. So a lot of it is you have to try to balance out the budget that you're willing to spend, and finding a ship that meets the budget, as well as a crew that is experienced, that doesn't overcharge, as well as having a solid plan on how long you're going to be out and where you're going to explore. It's a lot of homework, basically, and I thought it was boring. And next week, Seth, I want you to play a game that's boring. Seth, I want you to play Wall Street Raider for MS-DOS, which recently was released as a remastered version on Steam.
I'm excited. Does that street happen to have a $sign instead of an S?
It sure does. That's a Wall Street $sign Raider for MS-DOS.
You know that there's going to be some money involved. Zach had me play Beneath the the Apple Manor, which is a game that was developed by Don Worth and released on the Apple II back in 1978, and would get a special edition that was released in 1982 and 1983, where it made its way back to the Apple II again, and then got released on the Atari 8-bit computers and MS-DOS. This is a roguelike game before Rogue was created, and both Rogue and Beneath the Apple Manor were created in a vacuum, and Beneath the Apple Manor was created a couple years before Rogue. But yeah, and both the designers did not know about the other game being created. It was one of the first games to have procedurally generated levels as well. It was also the first commercial role-playing game that was developed and released for a home computer, the Apple II, instead of a mainframe computer that pretty much all the nerds were playing games on, which mainframe computers are different than a regular computer, and they still are today. Like a mainframe is a very different computer. They're faster in certain things and slower in other things. The game has some pretty basic graphics, but not for a game that's over 40 years old. The goal of the game is to get to the bottom of the dungeon and to get a golden apple, because the original game was released on the Apple II, and it's the Apple Manor. So a lot of apples going on. The game was highly praised at the time, and it was cutting edge of thought for the time period, and personally I think it's a solid game for the time period. Though it is pretty slow, even for contemporary games at the time, because of the amount of information that's processing through it. But the gameplay is solid still. Does it hold up in 2026? I'm not going to play it over a weekend all day. Like, it's not something that I'm interested to play because it's over 40 years old. The game is a little dated. If you like dated games, then sure. But for me, not so much. Next week, Zach, you can play Risky Woods for MS-DOS.
Great. I will play Risky's Woods. That being said, thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode. If you have any thoughts or memories about playing any MMOs and being involved or being a witness to or being affected by one of these jerks or jokes, or have your own story that you would like to tell, let us know. You can do so by emailing us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found via Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on social media. Look us up. We're available on Patreon. Be sure to support us if you can. We're available on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We're also available, of course, on our website, www.classicgamingbrothers.com. Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.